The moment Raymond Hayes realized the executive leadership board had completely miscalculated wasn't when they officially labeled him non-essential staff during the third quarter financial review. It was when he observed the smug, chinless grin of relief spreading across Chief Financial Officer Warren Gable's face. After Raymond agreed to coordinate the annual logistics audit without demanding an increased departmental budget allocation. They truly believed he was tamed, predictable, quiet, and completely invisible, much like an old piece of office furniture tucked into the corner of the executive suite. In that quiet moment, Raymond felt no sudden surge of anger or frustration. Instead, he felt a surgical clarity settle over his mind. It was that rare cold focus where the pulse slows, the eyes narrow, and the inner voice whispers a clear warning that the fundamental rules of engagement have permanently changed. 2 hours later, Raymond stood near the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the executive break room on the 14th floor, holding a simple ceramic mug of dark, unsweetened roast coffee. Across the polished marble hallway, the executive leadership team clinked glasses of expensive sparkling cider to celebrate their latest internal synergy initiative. Raymond slowly stirred his coffee with a wooden stick, blending seamlessly into the background near a potted ficus tree. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass, cold autumn rain streaked across the city's skyline, reflecting the sterile fluorescent lights of the corporate tower. To men like Warren Gable and the newly appointed Vice President of Cost Optimization, Lyle Croft, Raymond was simply part of the background scenery. He was 54 years old, dressed in immaculate dark gray tailored suits, spoke in quiet, measured tones, and never made theatrical speeches during quarterly town halls. But the fundamental truth about corporate architecture is that the foundation remembers every single burden placed upon it. And Raymond Hayes had kept exhaustive, time-stamped records for over 7 years. When Raymond had first joined Apex Logistics Group 7 years prior, he inherited a catastrophic supply chain network held together by emergency air freight surcharges, crumbling vendor relationships, and a warehouse inventory tracking database that still ran on outdated spreadsheet software from 2003. Raymond personally spent 3 months traveling across distribution hubs in Ohio, Texas, and California, walking the warehouse floors in steel-toed boots, observing operations, and restructuring the entire operational network quietly, methodically, and without demanding vanity slide decks or corporate fanfare. In his first year alone, his operational adjustments saved the company $4 million in expedited freight penalties. Over the subsequent 5 years, he was promoted sideways twice. His official job title grew increasingly convoluted, his direct operational budget shrank, and senior executives routinely referred to him as the fixer during annual performance evaluations. They used the nickname as a patronizing compliment rather than an excuse to grant him equitable executive equity packages or voting shares. Whenever an inexperienced manager botched a regional distribution contract or lost track of key inventory metrics, they turned to Raymond with smarmy desperation, asking if he could step in and smooth things over. Raymond always resolved the crisis, not for the suit-wearing executives in the boardroom, but for the warehouse supervisors and logistics operators, 2 levels down, who actually kept the freight moving. The internal decay of the firm accelerated dramatically 6 months ago when Lyle Croft arrived as the new vice president of cost optimization. Lyle was 38 years old, wore $500 Italian designer sneakers to boardroom meetings to prove he was culturally connected with the workforce, and once asked Raymond during a strategic planning session whether forklifts were still an operational necessity in modern distribution hubs. During an executive budget review, Lyle presented a flawed slide deck proposing to eliminate 90% of warehouse safety compliance supervisors across 5 regional hubs. Raymond calmly raised his hand, pointing out 3 basic statutory violations under federal workplace safety regulations that would result in mandatory federal inspection fines exceeding $2 million. When Raymond corrected Lyle's severely flawed capital expenditure projections in front of the regional directors, Lyle smirked as if Raymond had delivered a message in obscure Morse code. Later that afternoon, Raymond overheard Lyle whispering to Warren Gable near the corner office suite. Lyle had arrogantly remarked that Raymond was non-essential staff, though moderately useful for cleaning up operational disasters behind senior management. The phrase non-essential echoed in Raymond's mind like a persistent, blood-boiling hum at 3 o'clock in the morning. He did not storm into the executive suite, nor did he make an emotional scene in front of staff. Instead, he reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out the black moleskine notebook he kept beside his backup phone charger, and meticulously recorded the date, exact timestamp, location, and precise wording of the statement. Raymond had grown up in a small industrial town in Ohio, watching his mother run a small dry cleaning business and renegotiate commercial storefront leases with aggressive property owners who failed to realize they were being systematically outmaneuvered by a woman with an iron will and an absolute mastery of contract fine print. His mother had taught him at age 12 that corporate language was engineered to hide intention, and that silence combined with precise documentation was the ultimate leverage. Silence was never weakness to Raymond. It was deliberate target acquisition. The economic pressure on the company mounted further when private equity consult Derek Hollis arrived at headquarters representing Blackwood Capital Advisors. Hollis exhaled an intimidating aura of aggressive corporate restructuring, wearing expensive linen blazers with suede elbow patches while lecturing senior staff on scaling pain points and operational drag. During his initial audit of the third quarter balance sheet, Hollis glanced at the payroll ledger, turned directly to Chief Executive Officer Harrison Cole, and declared that maintaining long-term institutional loyalty on the corporate payroll was a dangerous operational liability. Raymond sat just 2 seats away, taking a measured sip of lukewarm conference room coffee while mentally building a personal ledger focused on executive hubris. The boardroom meeting quickly devolved into an hour of hollow corporate buzzwords. Phrases like strategic cost containment, aggressive burn reduction, and trimming emotional cost centers. No executive explicitly mentioned mass terminations, but Raymond recognized the predatory posture immediately. Standing in the quiet corridor, Raymond recalled his mother's advice about patient execution. When she fought off commercial developers who tried to condemn her small building, she never raised her voice in public meetings. She simply collected tax receipts, survey maps, and historical deeds, presenting them to the zoning board only when the developers had committed millions in non-refundable planning costs. Raymond had adopted that exact philosophy throughout his 3 decades in corporate management. He understood that executive vanity was inherently fragile and that men like Lyle Croft and Warren Gable would eventually construct their own downfall if given sufficient room to operate. Raymond returned to his office desk, opened his encrypted personal laptop, and created a dedicated directory titled Contract Enforcement Framework. He organized his digital evidence into chronological subfolders, budget adjustments, original logistics roadmaps, direct email communications, meeting audio transcripts, and verified contract revisions. Every piece of documentation was backed up to an off-site secure server. He knew that when corporate leadership decided to streamline operations, their first impulse would be to restrict internal access to server logs and performance histories. By securing his own documentation outside the corporate firewall, Raymond ensured that his legal position would remain absolute regardless of whatever digital maneuvers the IT department might attempt. He quietly shut down his laptop, adjusted his tie, and prepared for the long game. That evening, Raymond skipped his routine evening glass of bourbon and arranged a private dinner meeting with his longtime confidant and legal advisor, Daniel Kincaid. Daniel was a formidable employment litigator who had spent 25 years dismantling corporate non-compete agreements and executive breach claims across the state. Over thick steaks and dark coffee at a quiet downtown booth, Raymond laid out the exact corporate dynamics unfolding at Apex Logistics Group. He asked Daniel what specific legal framework would provide absolute protection if the executive board attempted to reclassify his 25 years of operational expertise as an expendable administrative cost center. Daniel leaned back in his booth, his eyes sharpening behind polished wire-rimmed glasses. He advised Raymond that standard Severance agreements drafted by corporate human resources departments were sophisticated traps designed to minimize corporate liability, while offering former executives pennies on the dollar alongside restrictive non-disparagement gags. The only true defense, Daniel explained, was a preemptive, highly customized executive retention clause embedded directly into his upcoming contract renewal agreement. Daniel proceeded to draft the provision with surgical legal precision, designating it as Clause 14C under the section titled Continuity Assurance and Strategic Transition Guarantees. The wording of Clause 14C was elegant, completely innocuous on the surface, and legally unassailable. It stipulated that in the event of an involuntary termination without cause, defined explicitly as any separation not resulting from proven felony conviction, gross negligence, or willful breach of fiduciary duty, the corporation would be legally obligated to pay Raymond 12% of the total net profits earned by the firm during that fiscal year. Furthermore, the clause explicitly mandated that the full payment would become immediately due within 90 days of written notice if no alternative executive severance of package of equal or greater financial value was accepted in writing by the employee. It was an ironclad financial razor buried deep inside 40 pages of standard executive employment boilerplate. 3 weeks later, during the annual executive contract refresh, Raymond presented the updated documentation to internal corporate counsel Brenda Marsh. Brenda was an overworked, underpaid legal representative who routinely filed non-disclosure agreements as unsearchable flat document images and spent her afternoons handling mundane vendor contract disputes. Skimming hastily through the 40-page document while complaining aloud about routine executive continuity paperwork, Brenda signed and officially stamped the agreement with the casual indifference of an employee eager to leave for the weekend. Raymond secured the countersigned original document, took it directly to his residence, and stored it inside his fireproof iron vault alongside his mother's antique gold watch and personal property deeds. In the weeks that followed, the executive leadership team officially launched Project Leanfire. Lyle Croft delivered an elaborate internal presentation filled with bright slide decks and grandiose claims about igniting core corporate value through aggressive workforce optimization. Raymond noted in his Moleskine journal that igniting core value was simply corporate euphemism for gutting operational departments while gaslighting the remaining staff. Within 48 hours, Raymond's team of 6 veteran logistics analysts, Lucas, Sarah, David, Elena, Tom, and Claire, who actually understood complex inventory variance and gross margin calculations, was systematically dismantled. Lucas and Elena were transferred to marketing, Tom and Claire were assigned to compliance, and David and Sarah were handed pink slips, alongside $15 meal delivery vouchers. Raymond was assigned a lateral transfer, given the meaningless title of Senior Strategic Liaison of Operations, and placed under the direct supervision of Kevin Drake. Kevin was 29 years old, possessed zero real-world operational experience, and represented the absolute pinnacle of corporate vanity. During his first team meeting, Kevin interrupted Raymond 4 separate times, insisting that they needed to simplify back-end distribution formulas for the creative design department. In the 3rd week of the transition, Kevin presented a comprehensive supply chain optimization roadmap during a regional strategic conference. Raymond sat quietly in the back row as Kevin displayed Raymond's proprietary logistics architecture, having erased Raymond's digital watermark and replaced it with his own name printed in Comic Sans font. Kevin arrogantly boasted to the executive board that he had built the entire framework over a single weekend. Raymond smiled calmly, complimented Kevin on the visual design, and immediately archived digital screenshots, original file metadata, and electronic timestamps in his encrypted personal drive to document clear intellectual property infringement under federal copyright standards codified under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. During their steakhouse dinner, Daniel Kincaid had emphasized the psychological dimension of contract negotiation. He reminded Raymond that corporate legal departments are rarely paranoid about standard boilerplate language when reviewing routine executive renewals. They focus almost exclusively on immediate salary figures, signing bonuses, and non-compete durations. By embedding Clause 14C within standard continuity language, Raymond exploited the systemic laziness of corporate attorneys who assume mid-level executive contracts follow predictable templates. When Brenda Marsh signed the contract refresh 3 weeks later, she had barely glanced past the initial salary schedule. Her mind was occupied with an upcoming HR audit and personal travel plans for the holiday weekend. She stamped the document with corporate seal, scanned a digital copy into the central employee portal, and handed Raymond the original paper copy without asking a single clarifying question. Raymond had politely thanked her, walked calmly back to his office, and placed the original paper document inside his leather portfolio. The transition under Kevin Drake over the subsequent weeks provided daily confirmation that Raymond's strategic foresight was justified. Kevin spent his mornings ordering expensive catered lunches for the marketing staff and organizing mandatory team-building exercises that accomplished nothing. When Kevin presented Raymond's stolen supply chain heat map to the board, he strutted around the conference room, taking credit for solving complex freight bottleneck challenges that had plagued the firm for years. Raymond sat in the corner, taking precise notes on Kevin's verbal statements during the presentation. Every claim Kevin made regarding his personal authorship of the logistics roadmap was captured on official meeting recordings, solidifying Raymond's intellectual property claim under federal copyright standards. The structural breaking point arrived during the mandatory fourth quarter executive assembly. CEO Harrison Cole stood under the soft LED illumination of the primary conference room, wearing a tailored denim button-down shirt with rolled sleeves to project a humbled, working-class aesthetic. He announced, with rehearsed solemnity, that due to macroeconomic headwinds and shifting stakeholder priorities, the executive committee had made the difficult but necessary decision to indefinitely pause year-end performance bonuses for all staff classified as non-essential personnel. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the conference room as junior employees exchanged panicked, quiet looks. Raymond sat completely still, taking a slow sip of cold coffee, watching the chief executive who had previously praised him as the operational engine of the firm now reclassify his decades of dedicated labor as a luxury expense. 2 days later, Raymond was formally summoned to the Human Resources office. Brenda Marsh sat behind her polished mahogany desk, reading directly from a pre-printed cardstock script. She deliberately avoided eye contact as she informed Raymond that his employment was being terminated effective immediately as part of corporate restructuring. Brenda explicitly confirmed on the official record that the termination was without cause, citing zero performance deficiencies, policy infractions, or operational misconduct. They handed him a basic manila exit envelope containing standard health insurance continuation forms, but tendered zero executive severance pay or performance compensation. Raymond did not raise his voice, display anger, or argue with the decision. He simply listened with serene posture, nodded politely, and accepted the official written notice of termination without cause. As Raymond walked down the central hallway for the final time, Kevin Drake stepped out of his office with a patronizing smirk, remarking that Raymond would surely land on his feet somewhere else in the industry. Raymond looked at him with quiet composure and replied that he always landed precisely where he intended. Raymond gathered no personal desk trinkets or vanity awards. He exited the facility carrying only his leather briefcase containing his personal mobile phone, his house keys, and his signed termination document. Upon returning to his residence, Raymond unlocked his fireproof iron vault and retrieved the countersigned executive employment agreement containing Clause 14C. At exactly 8 o'clock on Monday morning, Attorney Daniel Kincaid transmitted a formal legal demand letter via registered electronic mail and certified mail to CFO Warren Gable, HR Director Brenda Marsh, and CEO Harrison Cole. The legal correspondence included a high-resolution PDF attachment of the countersigned contract and a precise legal directive instructing the corporation to execute full payment under Clause 14C within the mandatory 90-day window to avoid immediate breach of contract litigation. The attached financial statement highlighted the exact legal calculation under state contract law. Apex Logistics Group had achieved a total net corporate profit of $14.5 million for the fiscal year, a massive portion of which was directly generated by an $11.2 million federal infrastructure shipping contract that Raymond had personally authored, negotiated, and executed during the second quarter. Under the express terms of Clause 14C, 12% of the $14.5 million net profit established a legally binding debt owed to Raymond Hayes of exactly $1,746,210.34. The corporate town hall assembly had been a masterclass in executive manipulation. CEO Harrison Cole spent 20 minutes highlighting the company's commitment to shared sacrifice before quiet announcements were made regarding bonus suspensions for operational personnel. Meanwhile, internal SEC filings revealed that senior executive officers had quietly approved substantial stock option grants for themselves just 2 weeks prior. Raymond watched the presentation with detached interest, recognizing that the board's hypocrisy would serve as compelling evidence of bad faith during arbitration. When Brenda Marsh delivered the termination notice 2 days later, her hands were visibly trembling as she handed over the manila folder. She knew Raymond had served the firm for 7 years, with unblemished performance evaluations, yet she was forced to execute a script written by outside consultants who viewed employees as line-item expenses. Raymond's calm acceptance of the pink slip visibly rattled her. Employees fired without notice typically reacted with shock, anger, or tearful protests. Raymond's dignified composure made it clear that he was not a victim caught off guard, but a strategist executing a long-planned maneuver. After walking out of the corporate headquarters building, Raymond stood on the sidewalk for a moment, taking a deep breath of crisp autumn air. He felt no sadness or regret. He walked 3 blocks to a quiet coffee shop, met Daniel Kincaid, and reviewed the final draft of the formal legal demand letter. Daniel verified that all contract exhibits, termination records, and profit calculations were properly indexed. With a single tap on his tablet screen, Daniel dispatched the demand letter to the executive team, setting off a countdown that would dismantle the board's financial illusions. At 8:15 on Monday morning, HR Director Brenda Marsh opened the legal correspondence. As she read Clause 14C for the second time, the color drained completely from her face. She realized with sheer horror that the clause contained no salary cap, no discretionary board oversight, and no standard severance limitation. It explicitly mandated 12% of total corporate net profit. Panic-stricken, Brenda immediately forwarded the email to CFO Warren Gable with 3 urgent words. Please review urgently. Across the executive floor, Warren Gable was reviewing fourth quarter financial projections when the high-priority notification appeared on his screen. Upon reading the unambiguous contractual terms, his hands began to shake violently. His gold fountain pen slipped from his fingers, striking the glass desk surface with a sharp metallic clack. Lyle Croft, sitting nearby, casually asked whether they could simply ignore an email from a terminated employee. Warren turned to Lyle with unbridled rage, informing him that the company had recorded $14.5 million in net corporate profits, and that Clause 14C created an absolute, non-negotiable financial obligation of over $1.7 million. Attempting immediate damage control, Brenda Marsh dispatched a frantic follow-up email to Raymond, claiming there had been a clerical misunderstanding during the processing of his termination documentation. She proposed opening informal negotiations regarding a discretionary settlement of $120,000 in exchange for a complete release of all legal claims. Raymond read the email while enjoying a quiet breakfast on his porch, arching an eyebrow in quiet amusement before forwarding the message directly to Daniel Kincaid. Daniel responded with an immediate legal rejection, reminding corporate counsel that Clause 14C was fully active, legally binding, and non-negotiable. Simultaneously, Daniel filed a formal demand for binding arbitration with the American Arbitration Association, alleging breach of executive contract, failure of fiduciary duty under the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, and bad faith employment practices. Furthermore, The arbitration filing incorporated federal statutory claims regarding Kevin Drake's unauthorized appropriation and public display of Raymond's proprietary logistics framework, alleging willful intellectual property infringement under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. The comprehensive legal filing sent massive shockwaves throughout the executive board. Under federal financial transparency standards and Sarbanes-Oxley provisions, unhedged legal liabilities exceeding $1 million were required to be formally disclosed to institutional investors prior to the upcoming quarterly earnings call. When preliminary news of the pending arbitration leaked to major institutional shareholders, market confidence evaporated rapidly. Shares of Apex Logistics Group experienced an immediate downward spiral on secondary trading platforms. Harold Kravitz, the vice president of investor relations, submitted his immediate resignation by Tuesday afternoon, refusing to defend the executive board's incompetence during upcoming shareholder Q&A sessions. 4 major institutional investment funds dispatched formal legal inquiries to the board of directors, demanding an emergency audit of executive contract compliance and operational risk management. In the corporate war room, CEO Harrison Cole paced hysterically, realizing that their arrogant attempt to save minor bonus funds had exposed the entire corporation to catastrophic financial and regulatory ruin. The immediate aftermath inside the executive suite, following the receipt of Daniel's legal demand letter, was chaotic. CFO Warren Gable immediately summoned senior in-house counsel and outside defense attorneys to an emergency strategy meeting. The outside attorneys took one look at Clause 14C, compared it against state contract precedent, and informed Gable that the provision was virtually bulletproof. They explained that because the clause had been duly countersigned by authorized corporate counsel and officially integrated into the executive contract refresh, claim of administrative oversight carried zero legal weight. Brenda Marsh's panic-stricken email offering a $120,000 discretionary settlement was a desperate attempt to create a paper trail showing an attempt to resolve the matter amicably. When Daniel Kincaid rejected the offer within 30 minutes, he included a detailed statutory breakdown demonstrating that the settlement offer represented less than 7% of the total contractual debt. He cautioned corporate counsel that continuing to offer bad faith settlement crumbs would be cited as further evidence of willful breach during upcoming arbitration hearings. The addition of the federal copyright claim under Title 17 of the United States Code regarding Kevin Drake's stolen logistics presentation created severe personal exposure for Kevin and organizational liability for the company. When corporate legal questioned Kevin about the source files for the presentation, Kevin broke down in tears, admitting that he had simply copied Raymond's master files from the shared drive and deleted the watermark logos. The realization that their junior executive had committed clear copyright infringement, while representing the company, added another layer of legal vulnerability that the firm could not defend. Desperate to halt the public unraveling of the corporation, CEO Harrison Cole bypassed internal legal counsel and sent a personal email directly to Raymond. The message was dripping with uncharacteristic praise, offering Raymond a newly created executive position as Global Operations Transformation Director. The offer included double his previous base salary, fully restored performance bonuses, and a substantial executive equity package, provided Raymond agreed to return to the firm and withdraw all pending legal claims immediately. Raymond read the desperate corporate proposal while sitting on his peaceful garden patio. He spent 2 quiet minutes stirring his tea before forwarding the entire email chain, along with the verified arbitration filings, to senior financial investigative journalists at major national business publications. The attached documentation provided indisputable proof of executive misclassification, contractual breach, and deliberate attempts to conceal material contingent liabilities from public shareholders. Within 24 hours, investigative articles published across major financial media outlets detailed how a prominent logistics firm was facing a multi-million-dollar executive payout due to an ignored contract clause. The story went viral across executive networks, corporate law blogs, and industry forums. Legal commentators praised the tactical perfection of Clause 14C, noting that Raymond had constructed an inescapable legal trap using the executive board's own bureaucratic hubris and systemic neglect. Faced with imminent arbitration enforcement, public court depositions, and severe regulatory scrutiny from the Securities and Exchange Commission, the board of directors convened an emergency executive session. Senior legal counsel presented their final, unvarnished evaluation. Clause 14C was completely unambiguous, fully enforceable under state contract law, and impossible to defeat in any legal forum. Continuing to fight the claim would result in millions of dollars in statutory penalties, severe legal sanctions, and total brand destruction. During the tense boardroom meeting, CFO Warren Gable attempted to defend his financial strategy, but his trembling hand accidentally knocked his ceramic coffee cup off the mahogany table. The mug shattered loudly against the floor, spilling dark coffee across the expensive carpet in total silence. The board of directors voted unanimously to execute immediate payment of the full contractual debt. 3 weeks later, Raymond Hayes relaxed on the sunlit veranda of a private coastal estate 6,000 miles away, listening to the soothing rhythm of ocean waves against the shoreline. He picked up his mobile phone as a high-priority banking alert pinged on the screen. The electronic notification confirmed that a wire transfer of $1,746,210.34 had cleared successfully into his account. Raymond set his phone down, took a quiet sip of dark roast coffee, and turned the page of his novel. He had not engaged in emotional outbursts, public drama, or corporate sabotage. He had simply delivered the final invoice. CEO Harrison Cole's desperate email offering Raymond a prestigious promotion as Global Operations Transformation Director was accompanied by frantic phone calls from corporate intermediaries. They attempted to appeal to Raymond's long history with the firm, suggesting that returning to lead the division would restore operational stability and protect the jobs of remaining floor workers. Raymond recognized the tactic immediately. It was a classic corporate guilt maneuver designed to shift responsibility for management's failure onto the victim. By forwarding the correspondence and arbitration filings to investigative business journalists, Raymond ensured that the firm could not settle the matter behind closed doors or hide the financial liability from public equity markets. Within hours of the news breaking online, institutional investment funds began dumping shares, causing the company's valuation to drop significantly. The board of directors realized that every day they delayed paying Raymond's contractual claim, the company suffered far greater losses in market capitalization and public reputation. When the final wire transfer cleared 3 weeks later, Raymond received a brief, formal confirmation message from the company's financial institution, acknowledging full settlement of all obligations under Clause 14C. Raymond closed his mobile phone screen and looked out at the vast blue horizon of the ocean. He felt a deep, enduring sense of peace. He had not engaged in petty vengeance, office sabotage, or public rage. He had relied on intellect, patience, and absolute legal precision to enforce accountability on an institution that believed it was above the rules.